On today's show, who's missing from the CHL Top Prospects Game, and we'll break down two new rankings that came out recently. We'll talk about all that on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalikesh, joined by Sebastian High. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down, first and foremost, the CHL Top Prospects Game. We'll talk about who's there and who's not. There are some interesting omissions from this Top Prospects Game, so we'll go through the names that are missing there and kind of break down why they're not there. In our second segment, we'll talk about Tony Ferrari's rankings. His top 32 just came out. We'll talk about some of the surprises there. There are a lot of them. And same goes for McKeen's rankings that we're going to talk about in the third segment. We'll talk about some of the rankings they have there, the players they have, higher or lower than our rankings, and why that might be. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away with the CHL Top Prospects games. There are 40 players that are invited every year. They play against each other. Usually it's kind of a red versus white type thing. They separate the teams fairly equally, and they face off, and that gives a great opportunity for scouts to see how players do against, in a best on best situation in the CHL. My question is regarding the players that are not there. There are some notable guys that are missing. Anthony Cristoforo's one on defense. Clark Caswell and Miguel Marquez would be two big ones that are missing at forward. I want to focus on those two particularly because they're two guys that I've really liked in my viewings. And yeah, I'm really surprised to see him absent, especially given the forward group that's there. What's your take on Marquez and Caswell not being at this tournament?
I mean, they were players that kind of like forced themselves onto the radars of scouts this season, and they've been breaking out this year. So they have less of a historic track record, which, especially for like the CHL Top Prospects Game, is always really important. Like you always see kind of like snubs that happen because it's players that have just been coming into their form. But I think Anthony Cristoforo is almost a little bit more surprising, even though I think it's more merited to be left out of the roster than with the two other players. Like he's been struggling a lot more, whereas Marquez and Caswell have been playing some excellent hockey this season, but he's been like quite highly rated for quite a while now. So I was expecting him to at least make the cut here, but it's always interesting to see. I mean, of course they can only invite so many players, like they only make two teams. So that limits them a little bit, and you can't invite everyone. So there's bound to be omissions, but it would have been a lot of fun to see Caswell and Marquez at this tournament because I think they would have really lit it up in depth scoring roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just looking at some of the names there, and there's some names I'm kind of struggling to see merit the invite more than Cristoforo. I mean, Spencer Gill and Thomas Lavoie, two QMJHL for defensemen that, I'm still very interested in seeing them at this tournament because, the QMJHL is a league that doesn't really have the most parity. So they're looking really good against really good teams, really bad teams, and then struggling a bit more against really good teams. I'm curious to see how they do in this this best on best game because that'll be a better indicator for me of where they stand regarding their peers, right? But at the same time, with both of them, I could very easily see Cristoforo outranking the two. I'm also looking at Colton Roberts, Luca Morelli, even maybe. Carter Yakimchuk his point totals are there, but the play overall, I don't know. But yeah, one name I'm really interested in seeing at this tournament as well is Harrison Brunicky, who, if he gets drafted, would be the first South African, I think, to get drafted in the NHL, and he's looking really good to set himself up for that so far. He's been one player I've been really, really impressed with in the WHL with Kamloops. He's a simplistic-ish player, but when he wants to, he can pull out the hands and he looks really, really good. So that's one name I'm keeping an eye on. But the usual suspects are there. I mean, Sam Dickinson, Zayne Parekh, Henry Muse are going to be there. So yeah, of that trio, who do you think is gonna bump his stock the most?
I'm hoping it's Zayne Parekh. I think that he deserves to be higher than where consensus has him right now, and we can talk a little bit more about that when we look at some of the rankings later on in the episode, where Parekh's a little bit lower than we would personally put him. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think that especially in a best on best game like this, Parekh could really make a good showing and demonstrate with impressive clarity that his skill is really leaps and bounds ahead of his competition and even like
yeah,
the rest of the competition of his own age group. So I'm hoping to see that because I've been seeing it in every OHL viewing I've really had of him in the last 2 years. That he's consistently standing out as the best or one of the two or three best players on the ice, and especially offensively in terms of creativity and the utter deception that he has. Like he is a master of deception. He has a tremendous toolkit where he can dig pretty deep and find some quite fun solutions to simple problems because why not? He's testing himself, he's trying to push his own limits, and I
yeah.
think this type of game that could be really entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the forward group, I'd say my personal player to watch in this tournament would be Raoul Boilard, who's playing in Bécomo in the QMJHL. He's been ranked as a B prospect. He's a January birthday. He's really stood out for me in recent viewings, mainly through his just the translatability of his game. He's not the type of player who's going to astound you and flash you with these like supreme level skills, but he's still able to get around the ice fairly well. He gets to the right spots and with the right timing. He reloads above the puck. He funnels down, gets involved in forechecks and board battles fairly well. There have been many, many different areas of his game that I've found to be, really close or at least or even at an NHL level in terms of his maturity, his decision making. Like he's been really impressive. He does a lot of small things well, which is one of my favorite things to look for in a prospect. Outside of that, Berkly Catton is going to be a big name, obviously. Andrew Basha, I think is going to have a great opportunity to showcase his straight line speed, his ability to overwhelm opponents, and we all know how fast he can be. And yeah, I think Liam Greentree has been one player who's been kind of creeping up a lot of rankings, and I think the CHL Top Prospects game is going to be another opportunity for him to do that. Fantastic goal scorer. Like that's so
Yeah.
obvious every time you watch him, right? But yeah, I mean Tisha Ginla is also going to be there. My surprise for this one is Adam Yeko. I think that he's kind of like you see the frame, you see the defensive ability and the power forward like tools, and you get impressed. But like the decision making on the puck is just it's so weird, right?
Yeah, like I haven't watched too much of him, but what I have seen, it's been like, okay, there's something to build around here. Like there's
Yeah,
been flashes where I've seen him use his physicality really effectively in terms of like winning a board battle against like two opponents and winning possession and protecting it quite nicely. But
yeah,
oftentimes the next steps after kind of those possession battles, I see him like really hesitating and not really being sure what to do and how
yeah,
to then like leap on these opportunities that he's creating for himself. And when you don't know the next steps after creating this advantage, you lose it really quickly, and possession could be turned over back again in the blink of an eye. So
yeah.
I've definitely seen some hills and valleys from Yeko in my couple of viewings, which have been mainly in passing. But yeah, I think in terms of like a top prospects game, he has some extra advantages with the size. But in terms of NHL draft stock, I'm a little bit more skeptical.
Oh, for sure. I'm just looking at Caswell and Marquez, and I'm looking at the way
Yeah.
that they play, the way that they approach a game, and they're not there. And I'm just like, I mean, something's got to give, right? These two have been really impressive, and I think that them just simply by fact of not being at this top prospects game, like that's going to affect their stock a lot. And Caswell was a borderline first rounder for me in my top 40, and Marquez was a first rounder, albeit a late one. But I have both of them ahead of Yeko and above a bunch of the guys that are at this tournament. So it's definitely a surprise for me to see, especially those two not be there because yeah, they've been fairly impressive. And a quick shout out to Justin Poirier as well, who's been having a decent season over in the QMJHL and won't be at this tournament. But yeah, we'll keep a close eye on those two as the on those three and Christopher as well, who definitely deserve their flowers. But that wraps it up for this first segment. We'll get into our second segment where we talk about some more some draft rankings here. We'll start off with Tony Ferrari's very interesting ranking with a lot of surprises, like a decent amount of them. So we'll get into that after these messages from our sponsors over at eBay Motors.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and far more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, which is available to U.S. customers only. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk about Tony Ferrari's rankings. Tony just put out a top 30. Well, he put out a top 50, I think. Yeah, top 50.
He did.
Lots of players to go through here, and lots of interesting names, and where they show up is really interesting as well. Let's get into it right away. I think we can start at the very, very top with Berkly Catton at number 2, right?
Yeah, bullish take for sure. I mean, like we like Berkly Catton a lot at Dubber as well. Like I've thoroughly enjoyed my viewings of him this year. I mean, the pace, the raw skill, the desire to make things happen in the offensive zone, the determination to create offensive opportunities is just awesome to see. But we've seen quite a few warts in his game as well that kind of make us a little bit more hesitant in terms of the projectability of this high-end skill. But at number 2, it's a big bullish take for Tony here with Catton, and I can definitely see how he got there. I just personally am a little bit more scared with the projection to put him this high. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, he's a conflicting player because what I saw from him at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, I was just floored with the level of just his ability to constantly, play up to what the circumstances required from him. Like when his team needed him, he showed up. He was the most clutch player on that Hlinka Gretzky Cup team. And with Spokane this year, I mean, he's taken a bit of a kind of leader role, but at the same time, I'm not really sold on the fact that he can play I'm not sold that he can play his game consistently, is what I'm trying to say. Like he plays a game that's really tactical. It's really dynamic as well. He moves the puck quickly and gets to spots quickly, and all that's good. But like right now, what makes Catton good is his ability to be open. And can he separate at the next level is my question. That's why I have him kind of the 6 to 10 range. So I'm really surprised to see him here at 2. But I mean, to quote Tony in this ranking, I mean, he says his game features a level of nuance and understated efficiency, resulting in play constantly moving forward in a positive direction. His physical tools aren't elite, but his mind is. I agree. I just don't know how far his mind can take him, and that's a big question for me. But I understand why he's here, and yeah, I'm also on board with the idea of Caden Lindstrom at 3, like that.
Me too.
That I'm getting a lot more comfortable with. I don't know if I'd have Catton ahead of him, but Lindstrom at 3, I'm comfortable with. Outside of that, I think the big surprise and one I'm really pleased to see is Zeev Bouillon at 4, right?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's fun. It's definitely fun. Like, is it perhaps slightly reactionary with how the momentum's going in terms of draft stocks? Maybe, but the raw tools with Bouillon, the offensive creativity, and mainly more than everything else, the progression curve over the last 6 months. Yeah. Insane, right? Like just really incredible. Like I remember watching his first 2 games of the season at the time, and I was like, I like this player so much. He's going to be in the first round for sure. but I want to see a little bit more. And basically, with every passing game since then, he just like bumps up his level of play by like 20%. So it's like, well, it's improving at a ridiculous rate. And like obviously Tony's jumping onto that bandwagon, and I don't think that we're going to be too far behind either.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the main thing that stands out with me for with Booyam is how often he diffuses tension. Like that's the big
Yeah.
thing with him is he's constantly just calming down plays. And when his team needs him to ramp up that tension by joining the rush as a fourth forward or making a play from the blue line to connect with a forward down low, he's able to do that, but not just able to, he does it with such precision and kind of forward thinking that yeah, I'm starting to get on board with the idea of Ziv Bouillon being a top 10 pick. Right now, Ferrari has Bouillon as his first defenseman off the board, which
Yeah.
I don't know about
Bullish.
yet. Like Sam Dickinson, Zayne Parekh are just like I can't for the moment, but I can see how he can get there because every single step of the way with Bouillon, he's just constantly like added another layer to his game. And you see these kind of relatively undersized, really offensively skilled players, and you think, okay, well, he'll definitely have some defensive lackings in this game, right? But you watch Steve William and he's closing gaps. He's putting his stick in the right lanes. He's shadowing opponents as they run down the boards. He's like pushing players off in front of the net. He's doing all the right things. And his mind is the play, but his body also is, and his stick especially is always right in the right spot. So like there's so much to love with William, I think.
Yeah.
Moving further down, I think we can look at Cole Eiserman at 8 and kind of feel a bit of satisfaction knowing that we're not the only ones in which he's slipping in the rankings, right?
It's looking more and more like like an overall trend throughout like public scouting, but also more traditional outlets. Like we're really seeing Eisman slip in terms of the consensus, which isn't something that really I'd expected this season. I thought he'd be a player that like we'd rank lower than expected, and that he'd probably end up as a top 2, top 3 guy on most boards anyways.
Yeah.
But that has not been the case at all. So he's one that I'm going to be very curious to keep tracking this season. And I think next week we might have to do a little deep dive on his game and scout a couple games and have a full segment or two dedicated to just discussing his draft stock, because it's been fascinating to watch this season. But
Yeah.
two more players I want to highlight in this ranking, especially relative to each other, would be Alphonse Frey being ranked 17th and Zayne Parekh being ranked 21st. So for you lead first with Zayne Parekh at 21, and then I will back you up with my take on Alphonse Frey, who's quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can just straight up quote Tony here because he explains fairly well why he has Parekh at 21st. He says, "Do you want the good news or the bad news? The good news is that Parekh is a highly productive and dynamically skilled defenseman who has done nothing but attack play head on and create with skilled passing, nifty puck handling, and a willingness to create with his own shot. He's a lethal offensive weapon. The bad news is that he sometimes ignores defensive assignments, lets up in puck races, and seems to have no interest in physical contact. The good with Parekh is outstanding. The bad is concerning. Is he the next Ryan Berkly or the next Evan Bouchard? I've seen enough progress in his defensive game over the year, especially in recent games, that he's actually become my top defenseman in the draft. I have him at 3rd overall behind Macklin Celebrini and Ivan Demidov.
You have joined us.
Yeah,
You've joined the pack. Yes.
yeah, I absolutely have joined the club of Zayne Parekh truthers. But yeah, I'm on board with Parekh. I'm not as concerned as Tony is with the defensive assignments and that side of the game because it was an issue last year, but it's progressively gone better. Even if it's just incrementally and in small but notable steps, I think it's he's gone good enough and shown that he's able to get better defensively. So I'm not too worried. But yeah, what's your take on Alphonse Frey? Because I think that's the big surprise in these rankings, right?
For sure. I mean, 17th overall is quite the take here. I mean, we're starting to see Frey's name enter like first round discussions on quite a few boards now.
Yeah.
He's one that I've been zoning in on specifically over the last week that I've caught a couple games of now, and there's some really interesting tools here. Like Alphonse Frey is a really mobile defenseman whose strength comes in his passing game, his playmaking. He is very comfortable in activating off the rush, and while I still see some inconsistency in how he's able to apply that, I see him still being quite static at times. And as soon as he stops moving his feet, whether it's on either side of the puck, he immediately becomes like really passive and almost just disappears into the background and doesn't really help his team very much. But as long as he's moving his feet, he can really do some damage, both as like a transition defender, keeping his gap really tight, matching footwork really nicely, or offensively, he likes to switch lanes. He likes to do a solo rush where he's going up the right boards, and then the neutral zone cuts across the middle, sees if he's able to rush up that way, or if there's maybe an opening along the left boards. And then once he's there, he then passes it off to a forward who is like staying on the blue line. And overall, he likes to gain the zone with pace and with skill and to really get installed in the offensive zone, and then you can see his passing game really go to work. So he likes to use his skating ability in transition as a puck carrier, and then the passing ability really shines offensively, and that's really easy to see in the metrics. Like Lassialainen is starting to post the metrics that he's tracking from European draft eligibles this season, and Alphonse Frey's like his playmaking ability is really impressive. So the fact that he's up 17 here on Tony's board is definitely a take. Like it's bullish compared to consensus at the moment, but I don't think it's going to take very long for Frey to catch up for a first round ranking.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, some very notable names in this first round, and even through the top 50, just to end things off. Danilo Stinkov at 26, who's a Swiss defenseman playing in Zurich in the top level. We're going to get a really good look at him at this World Juniors, and I'm excited to see him because, yeah, he's a very mature player for his age with really good defensive abilities. But the offense, I think, will come against his same age group. John Mustard at 32. That's a real name. John Mustard. He plays for Waterloo in the USHL. I'm not on board with him in the first round. I've seen a decent amount of him, and I see a lot more of a kind of junior type of play. We talked about that in a recent episode and what that means. But yeah, kind of loves to stick handle through pressure and tries to kind of overwhelm opponents with pure skill, and it's not really something that translates very well usually. Miguel Marquez at 36, I'm excited about. He's been really good for Lethbridge. Yeah, other than that, you've got Beckett Seneca at 42. That's lower than we have him. Ryder Ritchie at 45, which is the lowest I've seen him yet, by a decent amount. And Adam Yeko at 49. Exactly. So yeah, that wraps it for a second segment and our breakdown of Tony Ferrari's rankings. Make sure to check those out at the Hockey News. Really good rankings, and he explains his stuff really well. Tony's a really good scout. But yeah, let's get into McKeen's rankings after these messages from our sponsors over at Sleeper.
The new NHL season is here, and it comes with all sorts of possibilities. Your favorite team could hoist the Stanley Cup. Connor Bedard could score 50 goals, and you can get in on the action with Sleeper. Sleeper is our #1 choice at the Locked On NHL network for all of your daily fantasy hockey needs. To win 100 times your money on Sleeper, all you need to do is correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. Now, you can do whatever you'd like with that framework. You can bet on your favorite fourth liner to score a rare goal, or on the young stars of the league to really get in on the score sheet. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
All right, so to close things off, we'll get into McKeen's rankings for the 2024 NHL Draft. McKeen's is a private scouting network that really does some great work. I know a lot of their scouts, and they're really good at what they do. I'm excited to get into this because there are a couple surprises in there. I think we can start off with Anton Salayev at 6 and Ivan Demidov at 7. Having seen both extensively, I'm having trouble with this one. I think that the main separating factor in this kind of conversation is size. I mean, Anton Salayev's combination of size and mobility is ridiculous, right? I mean, he closes. I think he could be the best gap closer in all of world hockey if he's developed properly, right?
It's a big strength. Like, he has, like, incredible reach to go with that mobility as well, and the amount of ice he can cover is something I really don't see from draft eligibles, ever.
Yeah.
So, there are some exceptional tools that I can understand scouting teams getting really excited about.
Mhm.
That being said, I think that with Ivan Demidov, you have a player who is less raw than Salayev in terms of his consistency and what he's able to bring to the table. Well, yes, he's not like a Selke candidate by any stretch of the imagination. He gets involved defensively a lot more than you'd expect for a highly skilled offensive winger,
Yeah.
and that offensive skill is breathtaking at times and can really, really be impressive. Now, he's been injured for a decent part of the season, so there's been
Yeah.
less viewings to go around with him compared to Salayev, who's been playing significant minutes in the KHL this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting take for sure. Like, I think just like you, I would disagree. I would go with Demidov over Salayev, but
Mhm.
I think there are definitely hotter takes in this ranking than this.
Yeah, for sure. And you look at, I mean, Zeev Buium at 16 and Zayne Parekh at 17. Again, Zayne Parekh is just not getting love.
Yeah,
And like I still understand why that is. Like I understand the hesitation that comes with Zayne Parekh because people I think are shell shocked by the Eric Brandstroms and Ryan Merkleys and the slew of other like good offensive players on defense that didn't pan out. But there's something different about Zane Parekh, and I feel like he's been stuck in that kind of comparison, given his style of play. But there's so much more nuance to his offensive game than you'll ever see with Merkley or Brandstrom, or other players in that kind of mold. He just there's like a 3 or 4 step advance offensively in terms of his processing of the game that he has on everyone on the ice consistently. And beyond that, like I mentioned in our second segment, he's gotten better at at the defensive side of the game. He's shown that he's able to take those steps and improve. I think another conversation, another comparison you can have with Zane Parekh is that defenseman that Calgary picked up in like the second round. His name's evading me. Something Poirier. Um,
oh yeah, yeah,
you know who I mean, right? I mean,
yeah. Of course.
his main issue. It
Is
was
you
so
saying?
obvious.
No,
No, I was just saying it's this
is
year.
this year? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Emile Poirier, I think something like that. But yeah, I'm just like very surprised to see that he's having these names thrown around as
Jeremy.
comparisons. Jeremy Poirier, that's who it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, he like that was the most egregious example of like all in offensively
yeah.
and no care at all for the defensive game. Like, and even then, like Jeremy Poirier's taken some steps. He's not there yet, but like Jeremy Poirier refused to improve defensively. He actually, like in my viewings, he got worse defensively by the end of the year. So it's just like how do you go all in on this player? But with Zane Parekh, like there are some clear signs that he's improving in that side. So like, yeah, I'm curious to see how that evolves throughout the year and who ends up being right about him 5 years down the line. But I'm a lot more sold on Zane Parekh than 90% of the rankings we've seen. So yeah, other than that, some surprising rankings here as well. We've got Emil Hemming at 21 and Igor Chernyshov at 22. Having seen both a lot, I don't know
yeah.
how you rank Hemming above Chernyshov, right? Like I don't see it.
Like, the raw goal scoring ability is better with Hemming. Like, he has a
Yeah,
better shot than Chernyshov. Apart from that, I struggle to really find things that I like more in Hemming's game in terms of an NHL projection than with Chernyshov.
yeah,
Like with Chernyshov, like I've seen him play better against junior competition than Hemming, and I've seen him play better against professional competition than Hemming. I
yeah,
love the physical game. I love how he's able to get inside and stay inside in the slot and winning battles against defensemen, and on top of being high energy and
yeah.
creative and skilled. And sure, like the defensive zone play can definitely still like improve there, but Hemmings needs more work. So I between those two, I still think that Chernyshov is significantly more refined and projects as a far more versatile and overall like interesting NHL player.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple other surprises here, and I'm curious to see what the thought process here is. We're here with these two Swedish defensemen in this ranking. I mean, Leo Salin Valenius at 23 was a bit surprising to me. I have him as a kind of 32 to 40 type player, but I could see it. I just don't see enough in terms of his overall skill set and cohesiveness to put all his tools together and make him like a really good, NHL defenseman. But I'd be curious to talk to their Swedish scout and get a good look at what I've seen from him. But Alphonse Frey at 32
Yeah.
is exactly where I'd expect him to be given his recent performances. Right? I mean, between him and Salin Valenius, who's your favorite though?
Right now, I'd be siding with Frey. Like
Yeah,
I liked some early season viewings I had of Salin Valenius, but over the last month, so since our last meeting at Dauber, I've watched I've caught up on viewings on Alphonse Frey, and I see a player with a lot more creativity in his offensive game. He's a lot more refined in finding passing lanes and executing upon them with accuracy.
yeah,
He basically just like shovels pucks towards the slot, and sometimes like he doesn't like scan like he can see a passing lane, then like he can miss on a pass. Like I think the accuracy of what he sees still needs a bit of work, but he sees those plays with incredible consistency, and just the consistency with which he's able to get pucks to the slot. And well, yeah, you see that those pucks sometimes just going right through the slot and missing their target completely or getting intercepted. There
yeah,
is a far more like consistent offensive engagement and offensive creativity with Frey, where he's really trying to leverage his toolkit to get the very most out of it offensively. And with Salim Valenius, I think if he had a similar view of the game, and we're also trying just as much as Frey, then we'd be seeing two players that are a lot more comparable. But I
yeah.
think that he's a bit more reserved than he should be, especially at the J20 level. His tools are good enough to lean into and really try to squeeze the very most of offense out of them as he can. And I see
Yeah.
a lot more of that with Frey at this level than I do with Salim Valenius.
Makes sense for sure. And a quick shout out to Viti Väisänen, who gets a mention at 31. One of our Finnish scouts' favorites. Annie Karvinen really, really likes him. And I understand why. And we'll get a good look at him at these World Juniors. It's going to be fairly interesting. But that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They're a 24-hour news channel that's got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. Make sure to tune in for our next show as well. We talk about some NHL defensemen, kind of break down what the surprises are there, who's playing really well, including a rookie who's playing 30 minutes a night. We'll get into that on tomorrow's show. And this has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.